Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to my first Facebook Live lesson on Total IELTS. You probably don't know me. My name is Brendan. I am the owner of Total IELTS and we provide free online lessons on our website, and we've just started, as you can see, our first Facebook Live lesson, so hopefully a lot more to come. So please feel free to like our page and stay in touch, and get in touch if you have any difficulties with any parts of the IELTS exam. Okay, I just wanted to show you the site very quickly so that you know exactly what we do. So this is a quick look at what our website looks like. On the top you will see the different sections of the exam: reading, writing, speaking, listening. And for reading, for example, I have it split up into IELTS reading tips, and each one of these is a lesson, and these are the different question types. So feel free to have a look through that in your own time. If you're new to IELTS, I suggest hitting the Get Started Here button, and that will give you a brief overview of the IELTS exam. And to get all our latest lessons and to join our email list, you can enter your first name and email and sign up that way. So lots of good, useful resources on the Total IELTS website page. Okay, so today's lesson we're going to look at the IELTS writing section, and we're going to look at it for both the academic and the general training versions of the test. So if there are any questions, please post them underneath this video and I will try my best to respond to them. So we're going to try and have a look at the different types of questions you can get, and we're going to look at the IELTS rubric that your examiner is going to use. So that will help us to get an idea of how we can possibly get the score that we need. So I'm guessing that a lot of people are aiming for band 6 or above. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for here with this lesson also. So if you're not familiar with IELTS writing section and you're completely new, I just wanted to start with a brief overview of what is required for this section of the exam. So there's 2 tasks, and this is the same for both the academic and the general training version of the test. So there's 2 tasks and you've got 60 minutes to complete these 2 tasks. But as you will see later on, the marks are not distributed evenly, so therefore we need to be careful about how we allocate our time. So you're not necessarily going to spend 30 minutes on task 1 and 30 minutes on task 2. You're given a question paper and an answer sheet. So on the question paper, I strongly recommend writing your planning, any notes that you want to take, because the examiner is not going to mark anything on that paper. On the other hand, the answer sheet is the one that the examiner is going to be studying carefully. So I would save my answer only for the answer sheet and keep any rough work to the question sheet. Can be completed using pen or pencil. Personally, I recommend using a pencil for the simple reason that you can erase any mistake that you've made. Hopefully you won't make any mistakes, but it's a good idea to bring an eraser with you on the day. It just makes things a little bit easier rather than having to draw a line through a pen or using Tipp-Ex. So that's a good tip, I think. Right. So this is how the marks are distributed. You'll see that task 2 is actually worth twice as much as task 1. And I don't think a lot of students actually realize this, because I see a lot of candidates going into the IELTS exam and getting stuck on task 1, and therefore they eat into their task 2 time. Okay, and as you can see from this graph, bar chart or pie chart, apologies, that task 2 is worth more. Therefore, it requires more time. I strongly suggest 20 minutes for task 1 and 40 minutes for task 2. Task 1 requires 150 words, whereas task 2 needs 250 words. So again, in the word count, it could also tell you that there's a lot more required for task 2. Okay, so 2 parts to the writing section, but in task 1 there is a difference between the academic and the general training versions. In the academic version of the test, you will be given a visual representation. You can see on the left hand side of this slide, that you could be given a bar chart or a line graph or diagram, and your role is to write a summary of what you see. Now, you're not going to go into every nook and cranny and explain what's happening for each and every piece of data. Instead, you're going to report the most important features. So planning for academic writing task 1 is so important. It's quite funny because it actually doesn't even require you to have a high proficiency level of English to identify the main features on a graph. But as you'll see later on, it's vital that you write about the correct things. You can't just go into the exam and start writing, let's say, you talk about linguistics, psychology, and you don't compare and you don't identify the main features. You must not focus on the minor details. The examiner does not want to see them. On the other hand, with general training, I guess you could say it's a lot easier. You're asked to write a letter. Again, it's 150 words. The question will tell you who you are writing to and why you are writing the letter. You will also be given 3 pieces of information to include in your answer. So in many cases, I suppose you could say that the academic question is a lot more difficult because of that analysis that you have to do. Whereas in general training, although it comes with many other challenges, you are pretty much told what you're going to write about. So let's have a Okay, so this is a sample writing task 1 question for the academic version of the test. Right, so let's just focus on the question itself in the box first of all. The chart below shows the preferred mode of transport among young people from 4 countries. Okay, and it's quite clear from looking at the bar chart. The 4 countries are Great Britain, USA, Germany and France. And we have 3 modes of transport: car, motorcycle and bicycle. Now the next paragraph, if you want to call it a paragraph, is pretty much the same for every task 1 question in the academic exam. It says, summarize the information. Now I have underlined summarize. It will not be underlined in the exam. Summarize means to give an overview. So in other words, you're not going to go into the minor details, as I said earlier. Okay? This is further developed later on, as you'll see. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features. So they're even telling you that that they only want the most significant details on that bar chart. Okay? And make comparisons where relevant. So what they mean by that is you could compare maybe Great Britain to USA, or the amount of young people who preferred a car in USA in comparison to the amount of young people who preferred traveling by car in France. But you'll only speak about that if you think it is one of the most significant parts of the bar chart. Okay, so for example, you're not going to look at this bar chart and you're not going to compare Great Britain to USA, and then in the next paragraph compare Great Britain to Germany. The following paragraph you're going to compare Great Britain to France, and then you're going to compare USA to Germany, USA to France. No. Ideally, you should pick 3 main features. Okay. Now, ideally, you need to touch on all the modes of transport, and each country should be mentioned. But again, only the most significant details. So if you can just look at it, and let's try to find what you think might be the most significant detail or feature from that bar chart. I think you'll agree that car is probably the most popular type of transport in Great Britain, USA and France, but not in Germany. Okay, so again, you're grouping the 4 countries together to make one really strong argument or feature. And again, you're comparing it to Germany as well, which is really useful. So that could be one main feature. You might also say that in Germany, that young people, the amount of people who prefer cars and bicycles, if you see Germany, it's pretty much the same. Now, you can't say that they're the exact same. You would say they are roughly the same. Okay. Now, it's important that you also give accurate information. And under each one of these main features, you're going to back it up with data from the actual bar chart. Okay. So you're going to give the percentage. Okay, on the y-axis here. So there are 2 features. I'm just trying to see, is there anything else? You'll see that in Great Britain and in the USA here, there's a great difference between the 3 different modes of transport, isn't there? I mean, car is clearly the majority, motorcycle not being quite popular at 10%, and then bicycle almost halfway through. And USA is pretty similar in that there's varying levels of interest in a particular mode of transport. So that could be 3 main features. So please be aware that we cannot talk about everything on the bar chart. If you do, you're not actually answering the question properly. Remember, you have only 20 minutes to write 150 words, so you have to be selective. And that's why planning your answer beforehand is extremely important, especially for these types of questions. Okay. Just bear with me. Right. Okay, so that was the academic task 1. Let's have a look at a general training question. Now, as I said earlier, in the general training version of the test, you are asked to write a letter. And in this case, let's just quickly read the question. You have recently ordered an item through the internet, but are not happy with the purchase. Write to the company. In your letter, and you're given 3 pieces of information to write about. Okay. So, when you're given a task 1 letter, the most important thing to do is to figure out what the purpose of that letter is. So, the reason we need to find out the purpose is the examiner is going to look for that sentence that says, I am writing this letter to, perhaps it's to inform you that you left your mobile phone at my house, or maybe you're making a complaint, or you wanted to make an apology. This is the very first thing you're going to include in your letter, and the examiner is going to be looking for that. But the purpose is also very important because it tells you what tone to use in your letter. So, for example, if you are writing to a close friend, you're not going to use formal language. You're going to speak in a similar fashion to how you might speak to them in a coffee shop. Okay, perhaps with not as much slang, but it's going to be a lot more relaxed and friendly. Okay, whereas with a formal letter, you're going to get straight to the point, and you're going to tell them why you are writing the letter and what you want as a result of writing the letter. Okay, so you're going to be a lot more direct and clear. So, then you're given the 3 pieces of information. I'm going to show you that question again. 3 pieces of information to include in the letter. Now, just look at that question again. Let's try to figure out what the purpose of this letter is. It's actually quite obvious. It's written in the very first sentence. So, you have recently ordered an item through the internet, but are not happy with the purchase. So, this is clearly going to be a complaint type letter. So you're going to be making a complaint, and you've got to make sure that the person who gets this letter and your examiner knows why you are writing this letter. So I am writing this letter to make a complaint about, and so on. Okay, so you're writing to the company. Perhaps you could be writing to the manager of that company or the CEO. So you need to start thinking what type of language or what tone you're going to use in this letter. It's going to be a formal letter if you're speaking to a company. Okay, so it's going to be Dear Mr. whoever, Murphy. Okay, and you are not going to use informal language. You're not going to ask them how they got on last weekend like you may with a friend. You're going to be quite direct, and you're not happy with a purchase, so you're going to be quite stern as well. Okay, so the 3 pieces of information that need to be included: describe what you purchased. That could be absolutely anything. That's totally up to you. I recommend choosing, just in this particular letter, I would choose a product that you're familiar with and that you know you can write about. Maybe you're involved in IT, so you know a lot about computers, and you might know some good terminology or vocabulary about computers. So maybe you could use that to your advantage. Okay? But there's no right or wrong. It's absolutely up to you. The next piece is explain why you are not happy with the purchase. Again, this is totally open, but make sure you express your dissatisfaction. And the last one is tell them what you would like them to do about the situation. Okay, so that would be the last paragraph. Now, if you look at how this letter is going to be organized, you're going to start by opening the letter, and you are then going to give your purpose, why you are writing the letter, and then it's going to be followed by 3 separate paragraphs. And those 3 separate paragraphs resemble these 3 different items of information. Okay, so that is writing task 1 for the both academic and the general training versions of the test. What we can do now is we will, hold on, that's the call to prayer. I'm actually in Istanbul at the moment, if you're wondering, if you can see that lovely scenery in the background. Actually, I don't think you can, because it's so bright out there. Weather is absolutely beautiful here at the moment. So that's writing task 1. Writing task 2, on the other hand, is 250 words. And you really need to know exactly what the examiner is looking for in writing task 2. I think a lot of candidates feel that they see a keyword in a writing task 2 question, and then they decide to just write whatever they can about that. So, for example, they see pollution in the writing task 2 question, and they write everything they know about the task 2 or about pollution, which is going to catch you, and you need to read the question very, very carefully. So let's have a look at a sample task 2 question first of all. I hope the call to prayer isn't disturbing you too much. Let me just see. Okay. So, here is a sample task 2 question. More and more people are visiting foreign countries each year. What are the advantages and disadvantages of international travel for popular tourist destinations? Now, as I said, it's really important that you know what your examiner is looking for here. A weaker candidate will read this question and think that the answer is entirely about tourism. Now, in a way it is, but it's a lot more than writing about tourism. Because if you can see the last part of the question, they want the advantages and disadvantages. Okay? It's not good enough to just write about advantages. Even if you use the best vocabulary and a range of grammar, you need to have advantages and disadvantages. It doesn't need to be 50-50. Perhaps you could have 2 paragraphs about advantages and just 1 about disadvantages, but I strongly recommend you to do both, otherwise you will lose marks. So a weaker candidate may just write about advantages and leave the disadvantages out. That's why I always recommend candidates to have the question next to them and constantly refer to it, because when you're stuck in a question, you sometimes forget about what is actually being asked. It's so easy to come up with ideas and at the end you realize, oh, I forgot they actually asked for something else, or I answered the question incorrectly. This is why planning is so important. You'll also see that they want the advantages and disadvantages of international travel for popular tourist destinations. So they're not asking you for the pros and cons for tourists themselves. They want to know how it affects the actual destination. So, for example, London. What influence does tourism have on London or any other popular tourist destination? So that's what they're asking. Okay? Now, you will see that one of the marking criteria that your examiner is going to use is task achievement. Now, task achievement, to make a long story short, assesses whether or not you answered the question correctly. Okay, so you're marked on band scale 1 to 9 on how effectively you answer that question. So let's just read it first, and then we'll show a sample answer, and maybe you can tell me if the particular candidate scored high in task achievement. So, task achievement is about understanding the question and providing a complete answer with a good level of detail. Okay. Again, understanding the question and responding to it appropriately. So let's have a look at a sample answer, and maybe we can see if this particular answer, oops, apologies. Can you read that? Yeah. Let's see if this particular answer is sufficient. Would it score high in task achievement? So we're going to use the same question as before. So the answer is, people say that travel broadens the mind. And I agree with that statement. Okay, I do too. When you go to a foreign country, you have new experiences and meet people who are unlike yourself. So, travel is a good thing for the world. Okay. Now, I think you'll agree that there's nothing in that answer that is incorrect in terms of, yes, of course, yes, travel does broaden the mind. Yes, you get to meet many new people and cultures and learn all these different things. So travel is a good thing for the world, whatever that means. Okay, that's fine. I guess that makes a lot of sense. The grammar isn't bad. Vocabulary is okay. But this particular candidate spoke about the effects of travel on tourists rather than the effects on the actual tourist destinations. So in this particular case, the candidate would have scored low in task achievement. Okay? So that just gives you an example. The candidate also spoke about advantages and didn't speak about disadvantages. But of course, this is only a short extract from an answer. Okay. So the next criteria that your examiner is going to use is coherence and cohesion. Okay. So coherence and cohesion refers to how clear and easily understood your answer actually is. So does it make sense? Is the examiner confused? If the examiner is confused, well then you're going to score low in coherence and cohesion. You also need to be able to link your ideas together. But not only your ideas, you're going to have to link your sentences together also, and your paragraphs. Okay? So paragraphs are a big part of coherence and cohesion, but it's not good enough to just skip a line whenever you feel like it, because you need to have one main idea for each paragraph. Okay? So in that particular question, you can have, well, perhaps you could, but it wouldn't be ideal if you spoke about the advantages and then disadvantages and then back to advantages and then gave another disadvantage in one paragraph. That would not be cohesive or coherent. Okay? So you need to organize your answer, and it needs to flow. It needs to be easily understood. Okay? This again is why planning your answer is so important. Okay? So coherence and cohesion is about presenting ideas in a logical sequence, so one after another, and linking them to each other. Okay? Clearly organizing the part 2 essay into well-defined paragraphs. Well-defined meaning one idea, one paragraph, one idea, one paragraph. Okay? So, let's have a look at another sample answer, and maybe we can assess whether or not it would score high in coherence and cohesion. Okay, 1 second. Just getting used to all this technology, all new to me, I'm afraid. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that up there for you. So this is a sample answer. It's not a sample answer for the previous question that we've been looking at. You don't need to know the question in this particular instance. So again, we're assessing whether or not this candidate is coherent or cohesive. Okay, so the air in our cities have become dirtier in recent years because there are more cars. Last Tuesday, you couldn't see the nearby mountain. Okay, so already the examiner is probably thinking, what has mountain got to do with the air in our cities? Okay, now maybe they're good, maybe it does answer the question and the points are relevant, but as an answer it doesn't fit together properly. Let's read on. Next year, so the previous sentence was last Tuesday, now the person is talking about next year. Next year there will be a new tax on cars. Okay, so she's going back to cars now. Again, very confusing. Okay. In the countryside, many farmers are starting to reduce the amount of chemicals they use on the land. There should be a growing interest in organic food. So, I'm sure you'll agree this is going to score very low in coherence and cohesion because the answer is just very hard to follow. There's no linking words. There's no cohesive devices. They talk about last Tuesday, next year. They talk about chemicals. Then they talk about air and mountains. It doesn't flow. Okay? So ideally, this candidate needs to develop their answer more. Rather than trying to touch on every single topic to answer your question, pick 3 and develop them fully with examples and real life experiences. Okay? I know it's easier to write one sentence on a lot of different things, but this doesn't get you good marks in coherence and cohesion. It's better to pick one idea and develop it fully and then go on to your next paragraph and do the same. Okay? So that's coherence and cohesion. And the next criteria that your examiner is going to be using will be lexical resource. Now, lexical resource is a fancy name for vocabulary. So it assesses how good your vocabulary is. Or do you use a range of vocabulary? Are you repeating the same words? Are you using words from the question? So these kind of things will get you a low score in lexical resource. For example, if you described everything as good or bad, that doesn't really tell the examiner a whole pile, because the examiner is still, you could say anything is good or bad. Okay, if you're describing a person, you could say, instead of good, you could say they're polite. Okay, or if they were bad, you could say they're selfish. Okay, so this is where a broad range of vocabulary comes into play. Okay, so it's very important that you don't repeat the words, the same words over and over again, and try to use synonyms. Okay, this is all explained on my website if you do want more information on it. Okay, so lexical resource is about using a wide range of vocabulary, including collocations and idioms. Again, we won't get into that today, but Total IELTS website should have a lot of information on those 2 figures of speech. Adopting the correct tone for the task. Okay, so let's assess an answer for lexical resource. In fact, I have 2 answers, and we will try to decide which one is the better of the 2. Okay. So we're back to the same question about visiting foreign countries each year and what are the advantages and disadvantages. Oh, I have to X myself because you can't see properly. Okay. What are the advantages and disadvantages of international travel for popular tourist destinations? Okay. I'm going to put that out as well. So the first answer, remember, we are assessing this candidate's ability to use a range of vocabulary, because that's what lexical resource is. So more people visit foreign countries nowadays because of cheap flights. Cheap flights allow people to visit lots of different countries. This has many advantages and disadvantages in today's world. So, what do you think? Does this candidate display a range of vocabulary? Is there any topic-specific vocabulary or higher-level vocabulary used? I don't think so, because if you read the question, you will see that a lot of the words are repeated from the question. People, foreign countries, What else? Advantages and disadvantages. So that's all taken from the question. And that's why you need to use synonyms, okay? Different words with the same meaning. Okay, so instead of advantages and disadvantages, this candidate could have used pros and cons, perhaps. Okay, the candidate also repeats words. Okay, so we have because of cheap flights, and then they start the question again with cheap flights. So it doesn't show a range of vocabulary. So this particular student would score quite low in lexical resource. On the other hand, sample answer B is a little bit better. Let's have a read. There has been a steady increase in the number of international travel by holidaymakers across the world. So, looking at the question again, more and more people are visiting foreign countries each year. Now, instead of more and more people, this candidate used holidaymakers instead of people. Okay? Instead of foreign countries, the candidate used international travel. Instead of more and more people, this candidate used there has been a steady increase. Okay? So already we can see that this candidate has a range of vocabulary and can paraphrase the given question quite easily. He or she then goes on to say, this has brought about numerous benefits and setbacks. So instead of advantages and disadvantages, they used benefits and setbacks, which is very good for tourists themselves as well as local economies. Okay? So instead of tourist destinations, this candidate used local economies. So again, answering the question, displaying a wide range of vocabulary. Doesn't necessarily have to be big words. A lot of people feel that they have to have, 10-letter words in order to score high in lexical resource. That's not true. You just need to be more specific with the language or the vocabulary that you use. Like I said, good and bad, they don't say a lot about what you're trying to say. So it's better to use more specific vocabulary. Okay. So the next one, and this one is the last one. Oops, did that. Hold on. Sorry. Yes. Grammatical range and accuracy. And I think this is one that a lot of people probably fear. It's grammar and the range of grammatical structures that you use. Now, this is something that needs to be covered in detail in another lesson, perhaps, because yes, grammar is quite difficult, but it's something that you will pick up over time from watching TV and listening to the radio. Personally, I recommend learning grammar naturally, but each to their own, I guess. It does help to have a good grammar book too, but in terms of fluency, it helps to learn it naturally, I think, because you will sound more fluent and coherent. So it says, creating a variety of simple and complex sentences. I suppose grammatical range and accuracy has a lot to do with complex sentences. Now, if you don't know anything about complex sentences, I strongly urge you to go to my site, totalielts.com, and click on the writing section, and you'll see a lesson on complex sentences. It is really, really important. Now, if you can't write complex sentences properly, I would not recommend using them, because it's going to interfere with your coherence and cohesion, because you're going to confuse the examiner. It's important. It's the same with vocabulary. If you're going to use a word, make sure you know how to use it. Make sure you know how to spell it. and make sure that it's appropriate. Okay, sometimes words change their form in different sentences, so you have to be really confident about the language that you use. Okay. Grammatical range and accuracy also covers punctuation, so things like full stops and capital letters and commas. Okay, some people have big problems with commas, and they replace full stops with commas. Not a good way to go. It gives a bad first impression. Okay, so just simple things like that. Okay, and these are things that you're going to look over when you're finished your answer. Okay, so it's not just about the tense that you use, it's about all the different structures and ways of saying it. So let's have a quick look at a sample. I think I have a sample answer. Yes, I have 2 sample answers. 1 second. Aha. 2 sample answers, and we're going to have a look at the difference in terms of the mark that they get for grammatical range and accuracy. So again, we're using the same question as last time. More and more people are visiting foreign countries each year, and we're going to give the advantages and disadvantages of international travel for popular tourist destinations. So let's look at the range of grammar used here. Sample answer A. People like to travel abroad. It is fun and exciting. They see beautiful countries on television. So, already we can see that there is not really a range of grammatical structures, because these are 3 simple sentences in a row. People like to travel abroad. It is fun and exciting. They see beautiful countries on television. That could have been made a lot more, I suppose, higher. It could have scored higher if we added in some discourse markers. Okay, and that's something, again, you're going to have to look up on the Total IELTS website if you are not familiar with complex sentences. Then they decided to go there. The people learns. Okay, so again, no full stop after there. And the people learns. People is plural, so there should not be an S on learns. It should be the people learn. Lots of new things, even though they try new foods. Foods should always be singular. Okay, so there should never be an S on food. And meets new people. So grammar does cover a lot of ground. Okay, and there's no one way of improving your grammar. So best thing to do, I think, is just to constantly expose yourself to as much English as possible to improve. The second sample answer here is: traveling to a new country is considered to be one of the most rewarding experiences of many holidaymakers. Okay, so traveling to a new country is considered to be plus ed. That's nice. Okay, one of the most rewarding. It's the superlative. Excellent. And the last sentence, we'll just skip a little bit. If I had the money, I would invest a lot of money into experiencing new cultures. So again, we're seeing a range, the if clause, which is quite impressive. Okay. So it's not always subject, verb. Okay, so that's what you should be aiming for there. All right, let's just see. Okay, let's have, a small little summary, I guess, of the lesson. Just bear with me because this is all new to me, this program. Hopefully things will get a lot faster and I will get a lot more confident. Okay, so from what we've looked at writing task 1 and writing task 2 for both versions of the test. Now we know that, let's get myself up there again. We know that task 1 is different for both versions, but we know that task 2 is quite similar. Okay, you should also know how the task 2 is answered, okay, or how it's examined, apologies, and what your examiner is looking for. So I'm going to put up a few statements, and I want to see whether there are things we should do or whether things that we should avoid doing. Okay, so use as many long words as you can. So this could be for task 1 or task 2. A lot of people think that you should have long words. If you can use them, great, but the examiner does not count the number of letters. Okay, the examiner does not expect you to write like William Shakespeare. Use words that you know are correct. Okay, so I am going to put it as don't for the simple reason that it shouldn't be your priority. The length of a word is irrelevant. It's how detailed that word is, how much detail it gives the examiner. Is it specific? Does it explain the situation? Does it develop your argument? Things like that. The next one, okay, link ideas, sentences, and paragraphs together. If you could remember, this refers to the coherence and cohesion criteria that your examiner is going to use. Of course, this is very important, linking ideas, sentences, and paragraphs. So that's a do, okay? Oops. I'll get there. Alright, this is over here. Yes, get it smaller. Okay. Next one. Use complex sentences. This comes under grammatical range and accuracy. If you know how to use complex sentences, yes, add them. If you are 80% sure on how to use a complex sentence, consider adding it. The examiner will appreciate an attempt at a complex sentence. But again, if it's completely wrong and if it confuses the examiner, it will probably work against you. Okay? So yes, by all means, you should use complex sentences. So this is something that I would definitely encourage you to do. Excuse me, can you see that? Yeah. Use contractions such as don't or won't in writing task 2. Okay. So, don't or won't. Contractions are displays a kind of an informal tone. Okay. It's not something we should use in any of our writing tasks. Perhaps you may consider using it. The only time is in a general training writing task 1 letter where you're writing to a close friend who you really know very well. In that case, yes, you can use contractions, but again, this might even be considered a little bit too informal. That decision is up to you. It's important that you don't use too much slang, or in fact avoid it at all costs in your letter writing. This is for general training. So I do not think using contractions such as don't or won't in writing task 2 is a good idea. So that goes into the don't box. Okay. And have we got one more? I think I do. Yes. It's quite simple. Start writing without a plan. Obviously, I hope that if there's anything you took from today's lesson, it's that writing task 1 and 2 require detailed planning, and an examiner will see that you haven't planned your answer because it will be all over the place. Okay, because naturally as you're writing, you're going to think of new ideas and you're going to add them in, then you're going to rub things out and add it in another paragraph. You don't have time for that. Save yourself time. It's an efficient way of writing a good answer. Plan out your answer at the very start. okay, and do that on your question paper. All right, so that is a definite. Oh, start writing without a plan. Apologies, that should be a don't. Okay, so that's something that you shouldn't do. You should start writing with a plan. Okay, so I think, well, we're on 52 minutes. Hold on, we get rid of that. Right. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found some of the stuff very useful. Now, we touched on a lot of different things today. In future lessons, I'm going to narrow it down a lot more and go into detail about different elements of writing. Maybe we could spend one lesson on grammar or one lesson on coherence and cohesion. The same can be said for the other sections, speaking and listening. But if you have an idea for my next lesson, can you please post your idea below this video? It would be really helpful because I want to make lessons that are useful to you. And continue to ask as many questions as you can. Okay? I will try my best, even by email, no problem. You will see a contact form on my website. Okay? So thank you very much. Hope you found this useful, and see you during my next lesson.